I cut this off of the last half of the lecture 5 because it was getting too long, in order for you to have a sort of shorter bite-sized snippet of this information. But it does go along with the failures of rationality and the alternatives to rationality that we were discussing in the first half of lecture 5. Another set of theories that deals with failures of rationality is an idea called groupthink. Groupthink refers to decision making when individuals are deeply involved in a small cohesive group. The members are striving for unanimity, and that desire for a unanimous decision overrides the objectivity that they need, overrides their motivation to realistically or rationally view a situation. How do we know that groupthink exists? Well, the author of this idea, Irving Janis, says there are several symptoms of groupthink. One is the overestimation of the group. If we're talking about decision makers in the upper echelons of government, these people have experience, these people have expertise. They've gotten there because they have held lower offices, they've been in these situations before. They've had to make tough decisions before too. This leads to an overestimation of their abilities, and thus an illusion of their abilities, the illusion of invulnerability, that they've made hard decisions in the past, they've been successful in the past, and so thus they'll be successful in this current situation. A criticism of this is that that optimism will lead to risky decisions or risky behavior. Another symptom of groupthink is the illusion of moral superiority, that the group is on the moral high ground, that the country and its decision makers are better than other people, that they're doing the right thing. This goes back to one of the ideas on the earlier slides, or can be connected to that. The idea of using analogies or representativeness. If you are in this situation, let's say you're facing off with a dictator, you're going to put them into every negative category of dictatorship that you have ever seen. And so then, if you're facing off against a dictator in 2016, you're going to say, well, if this person's a dictator, then the other dictators in history must be like them. And so you'll bring up names like Stalin and Hitler and so on and so forth. And this puts the group on the moral high ground. We're doing the right thing. Our choice is going to be the correct choice. Particularly if you are in the position of protecting your country in a national security crisis. You're there to keep your citizens from harm, keep your country from harm. And so therefore, that sense of goodness of protection puts you on this plane, or at least this illusion of moral superiority. Another symptom of groupthink is closed-mindedness. Here, this links to the ideas of cognitive closure that we discussed before, of unmotivated biases. If you are trying to gain unanimity as a group, and you run into weaknesses, if you run into contradictory information, you're going to come up with collective rationalizations that reaffirm your unity, that reaffirm your superiority, and reaffirm that you are making a good decision. Stereotyping goes in with the second point that I made on the first slide there. If you find yourself in a situation where it is similar perhaps to a past situation, you're going to use that analogy to make a shortcut to rationality. You're going to use that analogy to stereotype in a negative way the situation, the people that you're in a standoff against. And so then, this is tied to points 1 and 2. If you are on the moral high ground, if you're doing what is right for your country, those people who are challenging you must be doing what is wrong. And so then if you are, dealing with a dictator around the world, they become like that historical most evil dictator. But what you then face in this illusion of moral superiority is then, if that person is evil, if they are like the dictator of the past, they must be too evil to negotiate with. And so then you are leading yourself away from fully and objectively analyzing a situation. This reinforces what scholars call an in-group and out-group decision-making pattern. Those of you who are in the decision-making apparatus are on the in-group. You are on the moral high ground. You are doing what is good for your country. And anyone else who is challenging it, either the opponent in the situation or even those people in your own government who are bringing you new information, contradictory information, are trying to get you to think differently about the situation, they're in the out group. You're good in the in group. And so anybody who is challenging you, whether it be another country or even from within your own government, are bad. And that's what in-group, out-group thinking refers to. Other symptoms of groupthink are based on a desire for uniformity and unanimity. People will self-censor. You don't want to contradict the group. So you may be a decision maker, you may be in the room with the president trying to influence everybody. But if everybody else has one opinion and you're of the contrary opinion, groupthink will lead you to keep your mouth shut. It's not that they're wrong, perhaps then that you're wrong. And thus this leads away from gathering new information and objectively viewing a situation. This then leads to the illusion of unanimity and cohesion. If everybody's on the same page, or at least seeming to be on the same page, if everybody is unified in this decision, it must be good. It must be the right thing if we're all thinking that it's right. Well, if you put this into the context of self-censorship, where people are purposely keeping their mouth shut, then you see that that's an illusion and not a reality of a unanimous and good decision. Anybody who does speak out, and this goes in with self-censorship too, is marginalized. They're pushed to the side. And oftentimes they're marginalized by what Janus refers to as self-appointed mind guards. People who push away dissenting opinions or contradictory information to filter what gets to the leader. And this leads to failures of good decisions and a failure of truly objective, rational decisions. The group discusses things, but those discussions are limited to only a few alternative courses of actions. No full range of alternatives. The group fails to re-examine courses of action. The group fails to re-examine those that may even have been initially seen as good ideas. Members make little or no attempt to gain alternative information or new information from experts. This goes back to the first point of the symptoms of groupthink, the illusion of invulnerability. Selective bias may be shown in the way the group reacts to factual information and judgment from experts. And there's a failure to discuss failure. What happens if their decision fails? What happens if their course of action fails? The group doesn't come up with contingency plans. There is no plan B. In all these ways, there can be a failure of a truly objective and rational decision. This has been applied to several instances in U.S. foreign policy history. The Bay of Pigs invasion, the decision to go in and out of North Korea, the escalation in Vietnam, and even the 2003 invasion of Iraq, where Senator Pat Roberts used the term groupthink. He said, "We were victims of groupthink in the global intelligence failure about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq." If we think about everything that we've discussed in the failures of rationality, one key problem arises, and that is a failure of time and a failure of information to truly, fully, and objectively assess a problem that you face and a decision that needs to be made. All of these so-called failures of rationality happen within the context of crises. Many decisions are made during times of crisis. If we talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis, for example, they had a span of about 13 days, 2 weeks or so in order to make that decision, and they were in that mode. They knew they had to make a decision very quickly, because if those Soviet missiles had become operational, then invasion and airstrikes wouldn't have worked. Crises are defined by time. The time is short, and a quick deadline demands a quick decision. Crises are defined by their surprising nature. The reason it is a crisis is because it's unforeseen, it's unexpected. And crises are oftentimes lead to stressful situations. Crises are stressful because of the perceived threat to national interests, potentially the threat of violence towards your nation state. And so then, you have to make a quick decision. You have to make a decision without fully objectively looking at a situation. You have to make a decision without gathering as much information as perhaps you should. And all of this can lead to a failure of rationality.